You know that feeling when it's like 2 in the morning and you are just staring at the ceiling?
Oh, yeah, the absolute worst.
Right. Your physical body feels like it, I don't know, just ran a marathon. Your bones literally ache with exhaustion, but your brain is just running at a million miles an hour.
Oh, absolutely. It's the classic wired and tired paradox.
Yes. It's aggressively cataloging, every awkward thing you said 5 years ago, or
Right.
predicting every email you have to send tomorrow, running all these worst case scenarios for problems that do not even exist yet.
Yeah, your physical battery is blinking red, it's completely drained,
Yeah.
but your internal engine is still inexplicably just revving at maximum RPMs.
Exactly. And for the longest time, I think a lot of us just chalk that up to, well, the cost of doing business as an adult in the modern world,
Yeah, we just brush it off as normal.
Right. We brush it off, maybe brew an extra pot of coffee the next morning and just sort of push through. But we are doing a deep dive today to look at the actual mechanics of what is happening under the hood when you feel like that.
And it is fascinating stuff.
It really is. We are unpacking the silent stress hormone problem. And this is all based on some incredibly illuminating clinical breakdowns by Dr. Akshay Palekar.
Which I have to say is such an apt framing, because what we are truly decoding here is cortisol.
The famous cortisol.
Right. This deep dive is about stepping away from, the generic wellness advice and actually looking at the raw biology.
Yeah.
We want to help you understand the exact mechanisms of why you feel constantly on edge, yet totally depleted, and how our modern environment is actively short-circuiting our evolutionary wiring.
And obviously, most importantly, the physiological levers you can pull to actually fix it.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's start right there, because I need to push back on something immediately.
Sure, go ahead.
The word cortisol is just everywhere right now. I mean, if you spend 5 minutes on a wellness blog or social media, you're going to see 100 influencers trying to sell you like a cortisol detox.
Oh, I know. I see those all the time.
Right. It is treated like this toxic waste floating around in our bloodstream that we somehow need to cleanse ourselves of. So are you telling me I actually need this stuff in my body?
I am telling you that if you successfully detoxed all the cortisol out of your body, you would be dead.
Wow. Okay. Well, that puts a damper on the detox T cells.
It really does. I mean, what's so fascinating here is how we have completely demonized our own biological defense system.
So it's a defense system.
Yeah. Cortisol is not the enemy. It is a highly specialized, absolutely vital tool, and it's designed for very specific situations. It's the cornerstone of what we call the HPA axis.
The HPA axis.
Right, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. It's basically a complex communication network between your brain and your adrenal glands. And when that system is working correctly, it does brilliant life-saving things for you.
Okay, give me an example. Like, what does it actually do when it's functioning the way it's supposed to?
So, say you're a prehistoric human and a predator suddenly appears.
Okay, tracking.
Your brain perceives the threat and instantly signals the adrenal glands to flood your system with cortisol.
So it's an immediate reaction.
Immediate.
Yeah.
And it forces your liver to just dump stored glucose into your bloodstream. So your leg muscles get this massive sudden burst of energy to sprint.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It sharply improves your visual acuity and your alertness. It elevates your heart rate to pump that sugary blood faster.
That's intense.
It is. And incredibly, in the short term, it acts as a powerful anti-inflammatory. So if you twist your ankle while running away, your body suppresses the swelling and pain long enough for you to get to safety.
That is why, I mean, looking at those benefits, cortisol sounds like a biological superhero suit.
It really is.
It's like a built-in shot of espresso combined with an internal fire alarm that just preps you to fight for your life. So the hormone itself is doing exactly what it was hired to do.
Yeah.
The problem is the timing and the dosage, right?
Precisely. It's a brilliant short-term rescue operation. It is not meant to be a permanent state of residence.
Right, right.
In a healthy biological rhythm, your cortisol levels follow a very elegant, predictable curve. Imagine a graph, right?
Okay.
Your cortisol actually starts rising before you even open your eyes in the morning. It hits its absolute physiological peak right around 8 to 9 in the morning.
Which makes perfect evolutionary sense, right? I mean, that is your body giving you the chemical push to get out of the cave, go forage for food, and be hyper-vigilant to the dangers of the world.
Exactly. It's your biological ignition switch. But here is the critical part. As the day progresses past 11 in the morning, into the afternoon and evening, that curve is programmed to slope downward.
It tapers off.
Tapers off completely. By 8 at night, it should be hitting its lowest baseline point. And that chemical drop is the signal to your entire nervous system that the day's threats are over, the perimeter is secure, and it's time to shift resources towards cellular repair and sleep.
But when we look at the clinical data for modern adults in Dr. Palakar's breakdown, we see a second line on that graph, the chronically high curve.
Yes, the chronically high curve.
And this line doesn't slope down at all. It is just a flat line hovering at the very top of the chart. The fire alarm gets pulled at 8 in the morning, and nobody ever turns it off.
Nobody turns it off.
We are taking a short-term, 10-minute emergency response and getting stuck in this all-the-time mode.
And that is where the silent harm begins.
Mm.
Because your body is simply not engineered to sustain a 5-alarm fire response 24 hours a day.
Yeah, that makes sense.
When cortisol stays artificially high for too long, the superhero suit basically becomes a straitjacket. It stops being a survival mechanism and starts actively degrading the machinery of your body and mind.
So, okay, if millions of years of evolution perfected this elegant curve, why are we breaking it so badly? I mean, we aren't out there dodging saber-toothed tigers anymore, so what is keeping the alarm blaring?
Well, this raises a really important point about how the human brain interprets our modern environment. The amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, it's incredibly fast, but it is also remarkably literal.
Literal.
It has a very hard time distinguishing between a physical threat to your life and a psychological threat to your ego, your social standing, or your schedule.
Oh, wow. Okay, this is the part of the medical breakdown that really stopped me in my tracks. Because we tend to think of stress as a reaction to something terrible and traumatic happening.
Right. Running from a bear.
Exactly. But the psychological triggers keeping our cortisol elevated are shockingly mundane. We are talking about chronic overthinking, a cluttered inbox, or just generalized anxiety about the future.
Yeah, those are the subtle, everyday microstressors. Every single time you panic about a passive-aggressive email, your brain hits the exact same HPA axis panic button as if a bear just walked into the room.
That is terrifying. But the one that I found genuinely fascinating was perfectionism and unrealistic goals. How does setting a high standard for myself at work translate to a biological emergency?
Well, if we connect perfectionism to evolutionary biology, it actually makes perfect sense. Perfectionism is essentially a form of chronic internal threat.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. If your core belief is, I am not safe, or I will be rejected by the tribe unless my performance is flawless, you are constantly telling your brain that your environment is hostile.
Oh, I see.
The brain responds by saying, understood, releasing cortisol so you have the hypervigilance to survive this threat. You're basically sending a continuous biochemical signal to your nervous system that you are under attack from your own expectations.
It is like we are hacking our own biology in the worst possible way.
We really are.
But it's not just the psychological pressure, right? The source points out there's a whole other category of physiological triggers. Things we physically do to our bodies that accidentally trick the brain into thinking we are in danger.
Yes, and these are often entirely overlooked by people. Let's look at sleep deprivation, or even just having an erratic sleep schedule. From an evolutionary standpoint, why would a human stay awake for 48 hours straight?
Because the perimeter isn't secure. Because something is hunting them.
Exactly. If you aren't sleeping, the primitive brain assumes there must be a life or death reason for it, so it pumps out more cortisol to keep you awake and vigilant.
Which then makes it even harder to sleep.
Exactly, creating a brutal feedback loop.
Hold on, I want to ask about diet, because this is where a lot of generic wellness advice usually loses me. The data says a poor diet, specifically one high in refined sugar and processed foods, triggers cortisol. But I need you to explain the mechanism there.
Sure.
Like, why does eating a sugary muffin for breakfast trigger a fight-or-flight survival response?
It all comes down to how your body manages energy. When you eat that highly refined muffin, your blood sugar spikes dramatically.
Okay.
Your body panics at this toxic level of glucose and releases a massive wave of insulin to shuttle that sugar out of the blood and into your cells.
Right, insulin does the heavy lifting.
But because the insulin spike is so aggressive, your blood sugar then crashes rapidly.
And the brain runs exclusively on glucose, right?
Right. So when your blood sugar plummets, the brain's command center interprets that sudden crash as an imminent threat of starvation.
Oh, wow.
It sounds the alarm and releases cortisol to force the liver to pump out more glucose to stabilize the system. So the blood sugar roller coaster is interpreted by the brain as a volatile, dangerous environment.
That makes so much sense.
And if you add to that a lack of physical activity or chronic joint pain and inflammation, your brain is just constantly receiving distress signals from the body.
Okay, so let's put this all together. Because we have this perfect storm. You're working long hours without a break, you're agonizing over an unrealistic deadline, you ate a sugary pastry for lunch, your blood sugar is crashing, and you slept terribly last night.
A very typical Tuesday for a lot of people.
Right. So the HPA axis is wide open, and cortisol is just flooding the system 24/7. What actually happens to the physical machinery of our bodies when that happens? Because, if you are someone who works out 4 days a week and you can't figure out why your body composition isn't changing, this seems like the missing puzzle piece.
It absolutely is the missing piece. The fallout is systemic. When short-term emergency becomes all the time, the very things that made cortisol helpful initially become highly destructive.
What's what?
Well, let's look at weight gain. Specifically visceral fat, the hard belly fat that accumulates around your internal organs.
Yeah, why there? Why doesn't it just distribute evenly?
Because of cortisol's original mandate, which is energy mobilization.
Yeah.
If your brain thinks you are in a perpetual crisis, like a prolonged winter famine or a siege, it directs the body to aggressively store any available energy as fat.
Oh, man.
And it specifically chooses the visceral area because fat stored around the liver and major organs is the easiest, most accessible place for the body to quickly convert it back into emergency fuel later. It's literally hoarding rations for a disaster that never actually comes.
Hoarding rations. That's
Mm.
wow. And while it is frantically hoarding fat, it is simultaneously doing the exact opposite to our muscle mass and bone density, according to the source.
Yes, because building muscle and maintaining bone density are long-term, resource-heavy projects.
They take a lot of energy.
Exactly. If your biological programming believes you might not survive the week, it is not going to invest precious energy and protein into building strong bones for 10 years from now. It diverts all funding away from long-term maintenance and pours it exclusively into immediate survival.
It is like a city indefinitely pausing all bridge repairs and pothole maintenance because they are spending their entire budget fighting a war.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. The infrastructure just slowly crumbles, and you see the exact same dynamic play out with the immune system.
Right, because earlier we mentioned cortisol is an anti-inflammatory.
Right. In a short sprint from danger, suppressing inflammation is great. But your immune system uses localized inflammation to attack and destroy invading viruses and bacteria.
Oh, I see.
If cortisol is constantly suppressing that inflammatory response, it's essentially handcuffing your white blood cells. You become highly susceptible to every common cold and bug that sweeps through the office.
Okay, that explains the physical deterioration perfectly.
Mm.
But there is a massive paradox here that I really need you to clarify.
Okay, what's that?
We established right at the beginning that a shot of cortisol in the morning gives you sharp focus and energy. That is its whole job.
Yes.
So how does chronic high cortisol lead to the next things on the symptom list? Profound fatigue, low energy, forgetfulness, and brain fog. If the alarm is blaring, shouldn't I be hyper-focused?
You would think so, yeah. But what happens is a phenomenon called receptor downregulation. It is basically the biological equivalent of building a tolerance.
Like needing 3 cups of coffee just to feel what 1 cup used to do.
Exactly. When your nervous system is bathed in cortisol for days, weeks, or months on end, the receptors in your brain become overwhelmed by the sheer volume of the signal.
So they just shut down.
To protect themselves from burning out, they essentially put in earplugs. They downregulate. The alarm is still blaring, but your brain has muffled its own ability to hear it.
Oh, wow. So you end up with the worst of both worlds. The chemical is still wrecking your physical infrastructure, but your brain is so numb to it that you just feel sluggish and foggy.
Yep. And that biological burnout extends to your metabolism, too. The constant forced mobilization of blood sugar means your insulin is constantly working overtime to clear it.
Which leads to resistance.
Eventually, yes, your cells become resistant to that insulin, which paves a direct physiological path to prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. Plus, the constant elevation of your heart rate creates severe cardiovascular strain, skyrocketing the risk of high blood pressure and heart disease.
It really is a silent destroyer, and it completely sabotages your mental health along the way. Mood swings, severe irritability, anxiety, and depression. Which, mechanistically makes perfect sense. If your internal alarms are screaming that your life is in danger, it's biologically impossible to feel cheerful, patient, and relaxed.
It is. Which feeds directly back into the most vicious cycle of all, which is insomnia. You can't sleep because you're anxious, and the sleep deprivation triggers even more cortisol release the next day.
Yeah.
It's a completely self-perpetuating loop.
Okay, I have to admit, this is sounding incredibly bleak.
It can feel that way, yeah.
If we are caught in this biological loop and we can't exactly quit our jobs, throw our phones into the ocean, and go live in a cave, I mean, we still have to participate in the modern world. How do we hack this? How do we manually hit the off switch and convince our primitive brains that the emergency is over?
The empowering news here is that just as specific lifestyle inputs can trick the brain into a threat state, we can use targeted physical and environmental interventions to trick it back into a state of safety.
Okay, good.
We can manually lower the cortisol, but it requires addressing the root physiological signals.
So, no quick fix detox stees. Let's look at the actual biological interventions. First up on Dr. Palakar's list, exercise. But the data specifies 30 to 45 minutes of moderate activity. I really want to dig into the why here. Because isn't exercise technically a physical stressor? Doesn't working out temporarily spike your cortisol?
It absolutely does. When you start running or lifting weights, your body releases cortisol to mobilize energy. But here is the magic mechanism. Engaging in physical activity allows your body to complete the stress cycle.
Okay, what does that mean? Complete the cycle.
Well, think about the natural sequence of a threat. The predator appears, that's the stressor. The cortisol spikes, which is the preparation. You sprint away, that's physical action. You escape, and you rest, resolution.
Right.
In the modern world, the stressor appears a terrifying email. The cortisol spikes, but then you just sit completely still in your ergonomic desk chair. The physical action never happens. The energy is mobilized with nowhere to go.
So the body is just waiting for the sprint.
Yes. By exercising, you are giving your biology the physical release it has been waiting for.
Yeah.
You're essentially telling your brain, look, we fought the bear, we ran away, we survived.
Wow.
Once that physical action is completed, the brain finally signals the all clear, and your baseline cortisol drops significantly lower than before you worked out.
That is a massive paradigm shift. You aren't just burning calories, you are physically acting out the survival sequence so your brain can finally relax. That makes so much sense. What about sleep? The protocol emphasizes not just getting 7 to 9 hours, but doing it at a fixed, consistent time every single day.
That consistency is the anchor for your circadian rhythm. If your sleep schedule fluctuates wildly, your body can't predict when it's supposed to initiate the morning cortisol peak or the evening drop.
Right.
Going to bed and waking up at the exact same time trains the HPA axis to release and recede on a reliable schedule. You are building biological trust.
And we also have to fix the fuel to prevent those panic-inducing blood sugar crashes we talked about. Eating whole, complex foods and pulling back on the refined sugars and heavy caffeine. I imagine a stable glucose level equals a stable internal environment, which translates to a we are safe and well-fed signal to the brain.
Exactly. But we also have to address the environmental inputs. We talked about how the brain interprets microstressors as threats. This is why limiting screen time and social media scrolling is not just some moralistic self-care tip.
Right, because the rapid-fire information, the constant subconscious social comparison, the barrage of negative news your amygdala is registering every single one of those posts as a tiny low-grade threat to your safety or social standing.
It really is.
So putting down the phone is literally cutting the wire to the alarm system.
It removes the artificial threat, and you replace that with active engagement of the parasympathetic nervous system.
I'm glad you brought that up. Break down the parasympathetic system for us.
If the HPA axis and cortisol are the fight-or-flight gas pedal, the parasympathetic nervous system is the rest and digest brake pedal. They operate in opposition. You literally can't be in both states at once.
So how do we hit the brakes?
Practices like deep, intentional breathing, meditation, or even focused prayer directly stimulate the vagus nerve.
And the vagus nerve is the physical connection between the brain and the gut, right?
Exactly. When you take slow, deep breaths, you are manually slowing your heart rate. The vagus nerve senses that lowered heart rate and sends a message back up to the brain saying, the heart is calm, therefore the environment must be safe. Stand down.
You are reverse engineering relaxation.
Exactly.
That is incredible. You are forcing the physical symptoms of calm to trick the brain into turning off the chemical panic.
Speaking of turning things off, the medical breakdown is very blunt about work habits. Take actual lunch breaks and don't overwork. In a culture that glorifies the 24/7 grind, taking a real break away from your desk isn't being lazy. It's an act of required biological maintenance. It breaks the continuous tension. And we cannot ignore the final two interventions from Dr. Palakar's list, which tap deeply into our evolutionary history.
Okay, what are they?
First, spending time in nature and getting morning sunlight. Morning sunlight directly into the eyes is the most powerful signal you can send to anchor that morning cortisol peak so it can drop properly 12 hours later.
Oh, that makes sense with the circadian rhythm.
Yeah. And the final piece of the puzzle, social connection. Talking, sharing, and not bottling things up.
Why is talking to a friend a biological intervention? I mean, I know it feels good, but biologically.
Because we are a deeply social species. For our primitive ancestors, isolation meant certain death. Being surrounded by a trusted tribe meant survival.
Right.
When you engage in meaningful social connection, your brain releases oxytocin. And oxytocin is fascinating because it physically binds to and neutralizes cortisol receptors. Meaningful social interaction literally chemically disarms the stress response.
Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground here. Let's synthesize this. The bottom line of Dr. Palakar's clinical insights is this. Cortisol is not a toxin. It is a miraculous, life-saving hormone that wakes us up, keeps us sharp, and gets us out of danger.
Perfectly said.
But it is designed for a sprint, not a marathon. When we let our diets, our sleep habits, and our stressful routines keep that alarm blaring all day, we actively degrade our muscles, our immune systems, and our minds.
Yeah, managing that rhythm isn't a luxury. It is the fundamental biological foundation for long-term health. I encourage you, as you move through your day, to look at your routines through this mechanical lens. Are you giving your nervous system the physical, nutritional, and social cues it needs to feel safe enough to turn the alarm off by evening?
It really changes how you look at a simple walk outside or a conversation with a friend. Which brings me back to where we started. Lying in bed at 2 a.m., wired, tired, and frustrated. It leaves me with this final thought for you to ponder. If our modern baseline, staring at bright screens, running on caffeine and processed foods, and constantly striving for flawless productivity acts as one continuous, low-grade biological threat, is true relaxation now something we have to aggressively and intentionally schedule and defend, rather than something we can just expect to naturally happen at the end of the day?